Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the next video. So, there's something I encountered here. I was going to wait until I made a little more progress in the game before making the next video because I don't want to, I realized if I show every single solitary second of making the game, last time we did almost an hour worth of work and we really didn't make that much progress. So I'm going to do some mapping and some writing and stuff outside of the game. Which we knew from the beginning, that's nothing changed, but I wanted to make this video real quick, even though I haven't made too much more progress, because I was messing around with some of the new features and seeing some of what we can do. I really wanted to have the idea that maybe you couldn't just pick up any of the pickups without certain things. Because one thing that I really liked about the idea of the pickups was, for example, I'm big on mining. It might sound weird. I don't play Minecraft necessarily. I don't like those blocky graphics, but let's say RuneScape. I love mining. The idea there, Terraria, which is kind of similar. There's also a game. I think what's it called? Aground. Aground. Anybody heard of Aground? It's very similar to Terraria, really. But the physics and the way it is designed is really cool, so that you can kind of sort of hack some stuff in with console commands, and it breaks the game balance wise, but it doesn't break the game like coding wise. The game still works, and so I thought that's really cool. But anyway, mining. I'm big on mining in games. Even Skyrim. I love just always mining for the ores and then using transmute ore to craft the jewelry. Then you level up blacksmithing while simultaneously being able to make a bunch of money, and then you can enchant those things, level up your enchanting, once you make even more money, yada yada yada. I'm just a big fan of mining in games in general, and that's something I want to put into some of these games where you can get a pickaxe and you can mine. I had it in my very first game that's actually I took it down because it was a little too, I don't want to say buggy necessarily, but just some unfinished things. It's a little messy, and for how big of a game it is, I don't want a character or a player rather to get so invested and then not be able to finish it. But I want to put mining in this game. You're going to find a pickaxe somewhere and you're going to be able to mine with it. But I wanted the ores to be pickups so you could see where they were and be excited about it and be like, oh, I can't wait to get that ore, that valuable ore, but I'm going to need the pickaxe for it, kind of thing. That's kind of the effect I wanted to create. And in doing so, I created some dialogue here. Let's see if I take this one out. Nope, we're still stuck here. This is why I wanted to make this video real quick, because I encountered this and I just wanted to make sure that I, kind of warned you guys about it before anybody does. So with these new pickups, with the fact that we can put dialogue here, now, if I take the dialogue out, okay, but now it's not becoming active. So I wanted there to be this idea that, when you pick it up, if you have the pick, you get the ore. Otherwise, it just stays active. And maybe I'm just not doing it right. But the way I tried to do it, especially if I have this little warning, which that one can't talk, so I had to make it here. A pickaxe, mine this. Okay, and we'll save. What it does is it breaks your game. So just be warned, if any of you are trying to get real clever with this, here's what we have. It just spams it. You can't get out. You're stuck in here. Oh, good Lord. Now think, this is essentially running kind of in its own little environment, as most games do. But a few years ago, this kind of thing would crash your computer. Luckily, we can still save the game. We can still go and edit, mess around with it. It doesn't even crash the environment itself, because it's just these games are essentially being emulated. But if this was a game on a console, you'd have to reset the console. Period. And there'd be no way around it. So these are the kind of things you want to avoid, in game making or in anything. And this is why we test those things out. So yeah, don't try and do that. Okay, so that was that. Okay, well, now I'm stuck in it. Just be over here. So what I think might be better, let's see if I put an invisible actor here. Whoa. All right. Now what was in here, so I think these pickups, one thing that's actually cool about them isn't to use them as a pickup, because that's kind of the solution I found here. We put an invisible actor, and then I've got some other ways we'll do this later too, where they'll just kind of be in the walls. Because what's cool about the pickups as opposed to invisible actors is you really need to run over them. The invisible actor, you can just run into it and it will start talking to you. The pickups, you need to run over it for these actions to happen. So that's why it says after picked up, as opposed to talk behavior is when touched, because all you have to do is touch one of these invisible actors. All you have to do is brush up against it, and yeah, and our stuff begins. With these, once I walk over it, it happens. So I've deleted that from here. Well, I haven't deleted it, I've just copied it. And now we'll delete it. And I'll into here, but it is a little bit different. Your number of increases with 1, and then we're going to say this pickup 1 actually becomes inactive. Okay. Else you need to pick up, you need to pick X to minus. So let's see if this works here for as we're kind of intending. The idea is if you don't have to pick X, it's just tell you you need to pick X to minus. Now, what if we do have to pick X? This is our little test thing here that gives tokens. So let's say hero receives I before E. Can pick. Unknown property or action. Is that not how you spell receives? Actually, not I before E? Okay, so never mind. E before I in the receive. My spelling is terrible. Okay, so that should give us pick. And now we mind it. Excellent, but we didn't have it give us a warning. And now, only issue with that too is that the invisible actor is still there. So we'll just make the invisible actor inactive if we want. Wait, what? Oh, that's our, no, that's, yeah. But we don't need to do that because this was just for testing. So for what I was trying to do, if you get the idea of what I was trying to do, I think your best bet is to put the invisible actor underneath and go from there. Okay, so with that said, last time we did a little bit of mapping for our Eastern Desert area. We haven't, I've done a little bit of progress on that. I'll show you guys where we are. I didn't do too much. I just made a kind of an upper limit. Takes a while to get here. Just okay, all I did was I put a waterfall up here. It was kind of cool in that we can, oh, did I go too far? I went too far. One thing that was cool about this waterfall is just another great functionality of this. We can go to Inquisitor Water, down to our waterfalls, do something like this. And then it looks like just the square, but we can, you know, this will make drawing waterfalls so much easier. Oh man, this is gonna be the easiest game to make. I honestly myself made multiple games without realizing all of the tools, and just, yeah, it's just great. This may be a little too big, but I like the idea of, you know, going off of Ocarina of Time influence, the idea of the river that goes through Gerudo Valley. And what could be cooler, you could even add a little bit of continuity, because if we have the snowy mountains in the north, it would make sense that they would run off a little bit to the east. They'd run off probably mostly to the west and end up in that like lake area that we're doing the Western Lakes. They'd run off a little bit to the east through this desert, but not much. And so this river here would actually flow south, and then both those would flow south into the ocean, which is what our southern area is going to be, which is the kind of the islands there. And that wasn't necessarily something that was intended, but I think that maybe subconsciously it's one of those things that kind of just makes sense. And it's why, maybe that's why that felt right. Maybe that, you know, I don't want to get too much into it, but you know, there's certain kind of instincts with making some of these things that that end up actually translating to reality, and then sometimes not so much. You know, sometimes it's you know, there are a lot of things that are kind of tropes within the fantasy world building, especially like in terms of the geography and the topography and the climates. There are a lot of kind of tropes that actually make sense. One that comes to mind is the Lonely Island, or the Lonely Island. My goodness, the Lonely Mountain, rather. Not talking about the kind of a comedy music group, but rather Lonely Mountain is something you see in The Hobbit. I think it's like where they're going, right? They're going to the Lonely Mountain. Please forgive me. Please, please, Lord of the Rings fanatics, please cut me a break here. Fairly certain to go into Lonely Mountain. Regardless, mountains come in ranges in general. That's how tectonic plates work. You don't usually just see a lonely mountain. It's not really a thing. I don't think one exists, and that's a very common thing for, let's say, you know, I spend a bit of time with the Inkarnate community. It's like a map making community, and those folks, you know, you post a map that has a lonely mountain, and first comment you're gonna get, oh, it's not really a thing. It's like, listen, it's a fantasy world, okay? But you're gonna need some explanation as to what magic or what being or what historical fictional event in your fantasy universe created this lonely mountain, because people are gonna be asking. And maybe for the sake of these games here, I think a lot of the community is more focused on storytelling, but it is worth noting that depending on what kind of audience you want to have, how expanded you want it to be, different people are going to have different expectations, and that means different standards on realism, because everyone wants a degree of realism, right? With a story, you don't want characters to have some sort of emotional development that just doesn't make sense based on their behavior. You know, you don't want them to get you know, betrayed by their friend, and that's how they learn to trust people. Like that doesn't make sense. That's not a connection for story development. It's like, oh man, my friend stabbed me in the back, you know, I should really learn to trust people more, and just you know, be vulnerable with folks. Like, that's not how that's going to go. But that may be something that, let's say, within the Inkarnate community, where they're more focused on the map making and the geography, maybe you could get away with something like that because they're not as focused on the story. So depending on the, I mean, that's just, you know, that's a whole conversation on demographics. You know, I want to put a door up here so I can come back here. Door 173. Okay. And then I'm just going to go back to first. There's an easy way to teleport around your big maps, at least just while you're editing, if you don't have to move the character or scroll down and stuff. I'm going to actually make a visible door. And this will go to Eastern Desert, door 173. This is door 0131. Let's go to Eastern Desert, door 0131. And actually, door 173. It's a little annoying that I can't see it, but what we do is we just put this door here. We just make it not go anywhere. So we have an easy way to get around our desert a little bit. That may be all we talk about today. Already quite a bit. And we'll just kind of leave it at that, and we'll get a little more in the next video. So we'll probably map most of the desert area off screen, although I do want to go over with you guys the kind of the issue of, we're trying to separate this kind of red waste mountain area. We're trying to separate from, you know, the sandy desert of the far eastern area here. So this map kind of has the two halves. And I'm probably going to have the desert take up the whole northeast, so it'll expand further. Yeah, it'll expand probably like all the way out here. Whereas this other area will take up like the southwest. And the idea is, I want something to divide them, and it's probably going to be a kind of a mountainous cave system. And how exactly we want to put that in and how that's going to look is going to be kind of the big obstacle for this area. What does that mean for the player? What's it going to take for them to go through that cave system and such? And I don't want it to be as much of a story thing, because I don't, for me, the issue with progressing the game based on the story is then you're preventing where the characters go based on what they do. And I think things should be separate. I think what happens in the story should be based on what the characters do, but where they go should be more based on what they have. Because whether or not a character has talked to someone doesn't really determine whether or not they should be able to walk somewhere, unless there's specifically like a guard in the way that says you need permission. But I'll tell you one thing that actually really bothers me. It's a pet peeve of mine personally. It's a very quick way for me to be immediately pulled out of the game and ruin my experience, is if I try and go somewhere and I just can't. Like, it just won't let you. Like, let's say this door just doesn't lead to the other area, and there's no real explanation for why. I just have to do some other event. For me, it would be very confusing. Or even if a better way would at least have the character have some dialogue where they say, "Oh, I should do this first." That can help a little bit, but it still doesn't make sense. It's completely taken away the player agency, where it's like, okay, now I don't really feel like I'm playing a game so much as I've been railroaded into the, the DM story, shall we say. Which the thing is, if you're trying to tell a cohesive narrative, you may have to do that. You may have no choice, because it has to go in a certain direction. That's just something there. So anyway, before this video gets too long, before I get all sorts of sidetracked again, I think we'll probably just go ahead and call it there, because I mostly just wanted to show you guys just what happened with that little object, and also something that we're going to be going for with like this pickaxe concept. And I also want you to know what just the next things we're thinking about with that Eastern Desert area, why that's going to be kind of a challenge. That's why I started with that, is because that's kind of the biggest challenge to me. The other areas I have a pretty solid idea of how they want to look and how I want them to go, but the Eastern Desert, how I want to section that divide between the Eastern Desert and those Western, well, not really Western, still Eastern in terms of the grand scope of the game, but west of the desert, those kind of Badlands, Redlands, is going to be tricky. The easiest one is probably going to be the southern area. I can exactly picture it in my mind. The western, pretty close. The north one, the snow assets, because they're all ref map instead of Inquisitor. I think the Inquisitor stuff is just a little bit better. It flows a little better. There's a little more things like this. We have a little more natural. Whereas almost everything in a ref map, it's very square. And maybe that doesn't make sense what I'm talking about, but like, things like this help you, where there's this little curve here, helps make things feel a little more organic and natural, and help it be a little more immersive. This ref map stuff down here, or like in the snow outdoor, there it is. You see, it's all very geometric, and that doesn't really allow for as many or as much of a kind of a natural feel, especially if you already have Inquisitor stuff in your game. I hesitate, but I would almost recommend, keyword being almost, which means not. Like, if you almost make a shot, you don't make the shot, right? If you almost, get a job, that means you didn't get the job. So when I say I almost recommend, it really means that I don't recommend, but I'm so on the verge of it. Would be making games either with ref map assets or with Inquisitor assets. Problem is, you'd be too limited on that. But I would encourage, once we have bring your own assets into the game, which is coming, it's a coming. Once we have that, I would encourage you to really, when you're looking for or making assets, think about, do they go better with ref map or do they go better with Inquisitor? And try to lean one direction or the other. It'll make your game feel more cohesive and coherent. But it depends on how picky your players are. Are they looking at all those little things like myself? Because like for me, when you play games where, let me just use an example level. Let's see, you have ref map ground 1. where people just do like a path like this, that then just goes like this, and then they just have like flowers here. And then they go back to Inquisitor, and then they just have grass here. This, well, okay. In this case, that actually looks okay. Maybe this was a bad example because this doesn't look terrible, but this cutoff here and this cutoff here, it just doesn't look right. At least it doesn't look as good as if you brought it all together with, let's say, you know, this, where we have this kind of more natural transition. And more so even than that, we have this natural transition from there. Because there are things that are made to do that, right? It's built into the game. So we can have these more natural transitions, and then this would, let's see, this one is tough. I think it's that, yeah. And that goes here, and then we can do this to make that more natural there. Give that there. You can see how, you know, it really feels like it all kind of meshes, right? This looks a little more, dare I say, realistic. It looks a little more believable, right, than the path we had before. May not be as pretty with flowers, but we can see the way this grass transitioned into it. These assets are made for that. They're literally made for that. And I think the Inquisitor just kind of does that a little better. I think the Inquisitor assets in general are superior, but RefMap ultimately gives you a lot of variety that you just don't have in Inquisitor, right? There are no flowers in Inquisitor unless we go, let's say, out into, well, Inquisitor Outdoor. There it is. You can go to some stuff down here. Did I already pass it all? What the heck? Yeah. So there's some stuff here you can do. You know, you can spice it up with some floral arrangements here, but it's not the same. It's not the same as let's see, rough map ground. Yeah, it's not the same as this. Look at that. It's so bright. We have the bright kind of neon blues in there, making up a lot of it with some little flecks of yellow and red over the bright you know, kind of lime green grass there. It's much more vibrant and kind of alive, and it's just brighter. It's just fundamentally brighter colors than what we get with Inquisitor, which has a little more of almost a darker, somber tone. So we're going to delete this whole level, but that's just kind of an example of what I'm talking about there in terms of mixing level. But so that gives you a couple of ideas of where we're going with the game. We're going to stop here. Thank you so much for watching. I mostly just wanted to throw this video up to kind of warn people of that potential error. So be sure to not do that in your game. Don't do this. But we talked about a couple other things as well. Alrighty. Thank you guys so much for checking it out. Hope to see you in the next video. Have a great day. Bye now.